After the long-rumored Nintendo Switch Pro turned out to be nothing more than a slight upgrade with no real extra horsepower, a lot of people in the gaming community got even thirstier than ever for a handheld on steroids. So naturally, when Valve announced the Steam Deck like 20 minutes later, the entire internet exploded and fans celebrated by frolicking in the streets like children in the night. I mean, after all, a portable PC that could play over 50,000 games and do God knows what else sounds pretty friggin' cool. However, one thing I don't think the Steam Deck's gonna do is kill the Nintendo Switch like a lot of people are claiming it's gonna, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. But before you go into a blind rage and call me a Nintendo fan man in the comments, crack open a can of bull milk and I'll give you the business. Alright, so even though the Switch's hardware is getting more and more outdated with each passing day, I don't think the thing's gonna slow down anytime soon, because at the end of the day, the Switch just has way too many games that way too many people feel like they can't miss. That doesn't mean that it's not gonna miss out on some big AAA multiplats, and it'd definitely be a lot cooler if that wasn't the case, but as long as Nintendo keeps putting games on it that people need, it's not gonna matter if the hardware doesn't compare to the Steam Deck or anything else. I know Nintendo's had some platforms that floundered like the Wii U and even the Wii during its last 2 to 3 years, but that's just because there was a cheaper alternative in the handhelds that were thriving during these times. Plus, they were also portable too, which always helps. Also, let's not forget that all it took were 2 Pokemon games to light the Game Boy on fire again in 1998, and I'd argue that that hardware was far more outdated back then than the Switch is right now. I mean, it was even weaker than the NES's hardware from 1983, and it was thriving during a time when the PS1 and 64 were running wild in 3D. Hell, even Super Nintendo games were barely even possible on the Game Boy Color. But even though most third parties don't even bother porting their AAA games over to the Switch, the big titles that did find their way over like Doom Eternal were still the exact same game. They didn't run as well or look as nice, but they were still the exact same thing gameplay-wise, as opposed to something like Turok or Tomb Raider on the Game Boy Color that were literally completely different from the ground up. And look, I'm not saying there isn't a market for people who don't give a monkey's nutsack about first-party Nintendo games, but still want to play those big AAA games on the go. But even if you personally are underwhelmed by the Switch, there's still more than enough people who are content with playing Nintendo's exclusives, along with all the other third-party games on the Switch that really don't need that much power. I know Steam's got over 120 million active users, so it's not like I'm saying Nintendo's gonna kill Valve or anything like that, but since just about everyone's got a computer, creating a Steam account's not the same thing as buying hardware, and I'm just not convinced that all of those active users want to play games on the go bad enough to pay $400 to $650 when they already have a way to play all these games as it is. So basically, I think the Steam Deck's biggest issue in terms of killing the Switch is that it doesn't have any exclusives. And I know a lot of people are gonna have a meltdown over me saying that, but I'm not saying that Steam doesn't have any exclusives, because obviously it's got plenty. But the Steam Deck itself doesn't have anything that you can't also get on a PC, and I think that's gonna prevent a lot of people from picking one up, because at the end of the day, portability is really just a cool bonus option rather than an essential. I mean, the Switch selling out the ass proves that people like playing real games on the go as opposed to mindless mobile garbage, but there are a big chunk of Switch owners who have no interest in handhelds whatsoever and only bought one just to play games that you can't get anywhere else on the planet. Even if you don't like to admit it, there's a lot of people out there who feel this way about Nintendo IPs, although I don't think anybody dislikes the option of having portability. I just think it's important to have exclusives is all. Plus, with Nintendo's long history of handhelds that have always outsold more powerful competition, I think that the fanbase in particular wants portability more so than a traditional PC gamer. I mean, if you think about it, the Steam Deck's actually pretty similar to the Sega Nomad. They're both amazingly impressive for handhelds at the time they were released, but since they're about as powerful as the hardware from the generation that preceded them, they're both still technically outdated if one of the big drawing points is supposed to be playing big AAA games on the go. Also, neither of them have exclusives that you can't play on another platform. Like, yeah, the Genesis had tons of exclusives, and since the Nomad was a portable Genesis, it shared those same exclusives, but since most of the people who'd be interested in a Nomad had a Genesis and could already play all those games anyway, nobody had to buy one, and not many people did. Obviously, there aren't any Switch OLED exclusives, but if the thing's supposed to be replacing the original, then that's not gonna matter one way or another. And lastly, the battery life for the Nomad and the Steam Deck only lasts about 2 hours. To be fair, you can get up to 8 hours on the Steam Deck if you play games that are less demanding or lower the frame rate, but again, isn't one of the big selling points supposed to be power and visuals? Plus, if you gotta carry a power bank or something around with the Steam Deck, then that kinda takes away some of the portability. Personally, I think it's kinda big for a handheld, but then again, I also thought the base Switch model was pushing it too, and I know that there's a lot of people who like the size, so that's neither here nor there. I know there's plenty of other advantages the Steam Deck has over the Switch aside from power, like the thing's basically a PC that'll let you do whatever you want with no restrictions, and that's definitely outstanding. Netflix, MySpace, Pornhub, X videos are all on the table, and you'll even be able to play games outside of Steam too. Plus, if you buy a game on your Steam account, you're not gonna have to buy it again if you get an upgrade, whereas Nintendo expects you to buy the same games over and over again with every new platform they come out with. Hell, sometimes they won't even give you the option to buy the same game again, so the Switch has got nothing on the Steam Deck in terms of freedom. Plus, even though a lot of people are gonna jump all over emulation for the thing, the reality is that the regular everyday casual gamer just doesn't care about that. I'm not talking about anyone watching this video, I mean all those moms who see a Switch at a fine establishment like Circuit City and buy one for their kids on a whim. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for emulation, it's great. I'm just saying that there aren't enough casuals out there who care about it enough to spend even $400 just to have the option to emulate games on the go. I'm not saying there won't be any casual gamers who have interest in the Steam Deck, and I hope that it does really well. I just don't think there's gonna be nearly enough momentum to kill the Switch like a lot of people are saying it will. In fact, I'll even go as far as to say that it won't even hurt the Switch. But I also don't think Nintendo's gonna hurt Steam either, and there's abso-goddamn-lutely nothing wrong with that, and I don't know why people need to be babies about wanting one to kill the other. But just because I don't think the Steam Deck's gonna sell like 100 million units that it need to kill the Switch, I'm not saying that it is or isn't gonna fail. Right now, it's all gonna depend on how the thing actually runs outside of YouTube demonstrations, marketing, potential price cuts, and things of that nature. Plus, I've got no idea how many Valve would actually need to sell to make money off the thing. I mean, Valve and Steam aren't going anywhere regardless of what happens, so the Steam Deck's only really a failure if they end up with warehouses full of unsold units. But if they sell out of however many they ship, then I'd consider it to be a success regardless if the number's 2 million or 8 billion. The pre-order sold out immediately, but in 2021, it's pretty much a complete disaster if any new platform doesn't sell out at first, so we'll really have to wait a year or two to really see where it's at. I hope it does well, and I know that pretty much everyone out there would love to have one, but I just don't think there's enough people who feel like they need one to where it'd hurt the Switch, let alone kill it. And even if there were, Nintendo's first-party games are always going to be enough to keep their platform from dying, especially now that they aren't dividing their games up between a handheld and a console anymore. But since Steam's running wild, even in the worst-case scenario, the Steam Deck's not going to hinder that in any way. Even if it doesn't sell 100 million units, it's still a nice expansion into portable gaming, and it's definitely a nice garnish for people who want to play their Steam library on the turlet. Personally, I'm not going to buy one, at least not right off the bat anyway, but it's definitely a lot cooler than the Switch OLED for whatever that's worth. But since this is the internet, I'm sure I'm just going to get buried by both sides for not saying one's going to kill the other. But anyway, that's all for today though, so if you liked this video, then you should check out my full-length movie I made with Jean-Claude Van Damme called You've Got Mail 2. If you'll excuse me though, I gotta go siphon some gas out of my stepdad's hatchback. Later.
So I want to say thank you to your loyalty, thank you for your support.